3, that's all they sent. 3 measly humans. The Crawl High Commander Andromedon's voice boomed across the comms, a wave of guttural laughter rippling through the assembled fleet. On the bridge of his flagship, the Dominator, Andromedon slammed a fist onto the command console, the gesture causing a tremor that ran through the crystalline structure of the vessel. Ridiculous. A waste of perfectly good warriors. I want that pathetic colony crushed before the next sunrise. Send down the vanguard, let them have their sport. His mandibles clicked in amusement, the sound amplified by the ship's internal speakers. Veridia, a remote jungle planet, strategically insignificant according to Crawl intelligence. A swirling emerald green jewel amidst the inky black of space, ripe for the taking. The Crawl fleet, a swarm of jagged obsidian warships, descended through the atmosphere, blotting out the twin suns. Scanners painted the surface. Dense vegetation, minimal infrastructure, and according to their data, only 3 life signs of note. A xenobiological research outpost, nothing more. From a hidden observation post nestled deep within the jungle's embrace, Joseph Reyes watched the approaching fleet. Sunlight dappled through the canopy, illuminating the intricate camouflage netting draped over his position. He adjusted the focus on his optical implants, the Crawl ships resolving into sharp detail. 3 against. Well, he'd lost count, but it was a lot of Crawl. He took a slow, deliberate breath, the humid air filling his lungs. "All right, let's see what you've got," he murmured, his voice calm despite the overwhelming odds. Beside him, Sergeant Eva Rostova meticulously cleaned her modified sniper rifle, the click-clack of the mechanism a steady counterpoint to the distant rumble of the descending fleet. 3 of us, huh? They must think we're really something, she said, her voice dry, filled with her usual cynicism. She spat a stream of recycled coffee into a nearby container. Or they just don't care about this rock. Either way, gonna be a long day. She chambered around, the sound echoing slightly in the confined space. "Just give me targets, Reyes. I'll paint the jungle red." In a separate, heavily secured section of the outpost, Myra, a Prilorian xenobiologist, watched the unfolding invasion through a reinforced observation window. Her violet eyes narrowed with disdain. Humans. Always so. Illogical. Captured during a research expedition months ago, she considered them little more than primitive apes with a knack for tinkering. But even she couldn't deny the steadfast perseverance etched on the faces of the 2 humans preparing to defend this backwater colony. Fools. They cannot possibly hope to stand against the might of the Crawl. Still, she found herself curious. Back in the jungle, Joseph initiated a series of automated defense systems. Camouflage turrets rose from the undergrowth, their targeting systems locking onto the approaching Crawl landing zones. Sonic emitters pulsed with subsonic frequencies, disorienting the invaders. "Buying us some time," Joseph said, checking the readouts on his wrist-mounted console. "Enough to set the stage." Eva, already in position on a raised platform concealed within the dense foliage, sighted through her scope. A Crawl landing craft touched down, disgorging a squad of heavily armored soldiers. She squeezed the trigger, the silenced rifle spitting a high-velocity round. The lead Crawl officer crumpled, a neat hole appearing in his cranial plate. "One less ugly mug to worry about," she muttered, already lining up her next shot. Crawl communications went silent. The Crawl forces encountered initial resistance, attributing the losses to the treacherous terrain and aggressive local fauna. The jungle itself seemed to fight against them, concealing hidden pitfalls and venomous creatures. They pressed on, their arrogance blinding them to the true threat. Deeper within the jungle, Joseph knelt beside a cluster of bioluminescent plants, their leaves shimmering with an ethereal glow. He carefully extracted a sample, his gloved fingers moving with practiced precision. "Interesting," he murmured, analyzing the data on his handheld scanner. "Unusually high concentration of toxins. Neurotoxins, hemotoxins, a nasty cocktail," He looked up, a flicker of grim satisfaction in his eyes. Viridia just might have a few tricks up its sleeve after all. Myra, observing Joseph's actions through a security feed, felt a sliver of something. Not respect, not yet, perhaps. Intrigue. The crawl would have simply burned the jungle to the ground. These humans, however, seemed to be adapting, utilizing, exploiting. A faint whisper of unease stirred within her. As the crawl continued their advance, Joseph and Eva began implementing their guerrilla warfare strategy. Camouflage traps snapped shut, ensnaring unsuspecting crawl soldiers. Hidden sniper nests rained down deadly fire. The jungle, once silent, now echoed with the screams of the dying. Joseph, consulting a holographic map projected from his wrist console, pointed to a large clearing several kilometers away. "That's where they're heading. Our primary objective. Time to show them what Viridia is really about." He turned to Eva, a glint in his eye. "Get ready, Sergeant. We're about to throw a party they won't soon forget, and this time we're using the local punch." He looked at Myra and then back to the map. The colony was built, not just to study but to weaponize this jungle. The crawl were walking into a trap, and it was time to spring it. The jungle air crackled, then vanished in a searing white flash. A thunderous roar ripped through the dense foliage as the charges detonated, sending a shockwave that rattled teeth and shook the very ground. Trees splintered, their burning fragments raining down on what remained of the crawl encampment. A plume of black smoke billowed into the sky, a funeral pyre for the crawl's arrogance. Ammunition cooked off in a chain reaction, adding staccato bursts to the cacophony. Andromeda watched from his command tent, his 6 eyes narrowed in fury. The holographic display flickered, showing the extent of the devastation. "3, just 3 of them," he growled, his chitinous mandibles clicking in agitation. "They will pay for this insolence." Despite the gnawing unease in his gut, he still believed brute force would prevail. Deep within the jungle, in a makeshift laboratory carved out of a cave, Joseph carefully ground a handful of iridescent leaves. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he meticulously separated the compounds, his movements precise and deliberate. The air hung thick with the pungent aroma of alien flora. He muttered to himself, "Compound Delta 9 shows the most promise. Highly toxic, rapid absorption through the skin. Perfect." Elsewhere, Eva, perched high in the canopy, sighted down the barrel of her modified sniper rifle. Her breath hitched as she lined up the shot. A crawl commander barking orders at his troops filled her scope. A gentle squeeze of the trigger, a barely audible thwip, and the commander slumped to the ground, a small crimson stain blossoming on his carapace. "One less," she murmured, ejecting the spent cartridge. The crawl comms went silent. Myra, confined to a small tent near the crawl command post, watched the chaos unfold on a monitor. The images of burning wreckage and fallen crawl soldiers flickered across her face, reflecting the turmoil within her. She had always believed in the crawl's superiority, their manifest destiny to rule the galaxy, but the humans, their resilience, their ingenuity, it was unsettling. Back at the former encampment, crawl soldiers began exhibiting strange symptoms. Rashes erupted on their skin, their breathing became labored, and their movements grew sluggish. They attributed it to the humid climate or some unknown jungle disease, unaware that Joseph's carefully extracted toxins were already coursing through their veins. Joseph, satisfied with his progress, carefully loaded a batch of ammunition with a refined version of Compound Delta 9. The rounds gleamed faintly in the dim light, each one a tiny vessel of death. Inside the crawl command tent, Myra intercepted a heavily encrypted communication. Decrypting it, she felt a chill run down her spine. The message detailed a plan to saturate the jungle with a cocktail of chemical defoliants, effectively eliminating the humans' cover. The jungle would be dead in hours. Myra's hand trembled as she deleted the decrypted message. She pressed her fist to her mouth, her nucleus tightening. She looked up, the image of the burning camp a stark contrast to what she thought war should be. She was starting to wonder about the ethics of this war, of any war. Meanwhile, Joseph and Eva stumbled upon something unexpected. While scouting a new route through the jungle, they found a concealed entrance, hidden behind a waterfall leading to a subterranean complex. The abandoned colony wasn't so abandoned after all. Inside, the air hummed with residual power. Rows of stasis pods lay dormant, and banks of humming servers lined the walls. But it was the central laboratory that caught their attention. Gleaming steel and glass-housed equipment far more advanced than anything they had seen on Earth. This was no ordinary colony. Joseph ran a hand over a complex piece of machinery. "This is bioweaponry research," he said, his voice hushed with awe and a hint of dread. Myra, her mind racing, made a decision. Under the guise of performing routine maintenance, she accessed the crawl communication array. With deft fingers, she rerouted signals, introduced glitches, and generally sowed chaos. The launch of the chemical bombardment would be delayed, hopefully long enough for the humans to escape. Working with renewed vigor, Joseph combined the refined toxins with a fast-acting delivery agent, creating a potent bioweapon. A single exposure would cripple a crawl soldier for days, with minimal long-term environmental impact. Suddenly, alarms blared. Red lights flashed throughout the underground complex. The crawl had found them. "They're here," Eva shouted, grabbing her rifle. The crawl assault was swift and brutal. Explosions rocked the complex as crawl soldiers poured through the entrance, their weapons spitting plasma fire. Joseph and Eva fought back fiercely, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Forced to retreat, they fell back deeper into the complex. During the chaotic retreat, a stray plasma bolt grazed Eva's leg. She cried out in pain, stumbling. "Go on, Rays, I'll cover you," she yelled, firing a volley of shots. "No, I'm not leaving you." Joseph scooped her up in his arms, the weight of her gear pressing down on him. He gritted his teeth and pushed forward, his muscles burning. Myra, watching the pursuit on a security feed, felt a surge of anger. The crawl were hunting them down like animals, showing no mercy, no respect. She saw that the crawl only valued strength. A priority message flashed on her console. "By order of High Commander Andromeda, if sabotage continues, all Prylorian scientists will be executed." Myra stared at the message, her face pale, but there was no other choice. She couldn't stand by and watch the crawl slaughter innocent people at any expense. She began formulating a plan to sabotage the crawl's main communication hub, a suicide mission. She would be branded a traitor, her family would suffer, but she had to do what was right. Joseph, having reached a more defensible section of the lab, set Eva down gently. He grabbed a syringe and filled it with a clear liquid from one of the lab's vats. "This will help," he said, injecting her with the serum. "It's an inoculation against the local toxins, should make you more resilient." Joseph wrestled with the captured crawl drone, its metallic shell resisting his efforts. Sparks flew as he bypassed its energy conduits, the air thick with the acrid smell of ozone. He needed to adapt these things, and fast. The bioweapon was potent, but its delivery system was crude. He needed precision range. He muttered, "Come on, you overgrown insect," as he spliced a final wire, the drone's optical sensor blinking to life, now slave to his control panel. Eva, propped against a crate, her face pale in the flickering light of the lab, studied the holographic display. Crawl patrol patterns swirled before her, lines of movement crisscrossing the jungle floor. "They're tightening the perimeter," she rasped, her voice still weak. "Less random, more deliberate, they're learning." She pointed a shaky finger at a concentration of patrols near the southern ridge. "Weak spot there, thinly defended, but something's not right, feels like a feint." Meanwhile, in the heart of the crawl communications hub, Myra worked with feverish intensity. Her fingers danced across the alien console, lines of code cascading down the screen. She uploaded the virus, a silent, invisible saboteur designed to cripple their network. As the upload reached 100%, a bead of sweat trickled down her temple, a data spike. She'd been too hasty. A trace remained. Damn it, she wiped the console clean, but the seed was planted. Discovery was only a matter of time. A low rumble shook the lab. The lights flickered, then died, plunging the space into darkness. Emergency lights sputtered to life, casting long, dancing shadows. Outside, the jungle erupted in fire. The delayed chemical bombardment had begun. "They're not messing around," Eva coughed, struggling to sit upright. The air grew thick with smoke, filled with a metallic tang. Joseph grabbed Eva, pulling her to her feet. "We need to move, now." He hauled her towards the emergency exit, the ground vibrating beneath their feet as explosions ripped through the jungle canopy. They ran, weaving through the burning foliage, dodging falling debris. The air burned their lungs, the heat searing their skin. An explosion rocked the ground nearby, sending them sprawling. As Joseph helped Eva up, he noticed something: the smoke. It wasn't just smoke, it had a strange, almost crystalline sheen. He pulled out his scanner, analyzing the atmospheric composition. His eyes widened. "It's not just fire," he said, his voice grim. "They're dispersing a chemical agent, designed to counter the bioweapon. Clever bastards." Back in the Crawl Command Center, Andromeda watched the bombardment with grim satisfaction. "Increase the dosage," he barked. "Ensure complete saturation, and bring me the Prilorian. Her brother will be cooperative." Myra, overhearing the order, felt a cold dread grip her heart. No. They wouldn't, but she knew they would. They were Crawl. She had to warn Joseph. But how? Every comm channel was monitored, every movement scrutinized. Suddenly, Eva gasped, her legs buckling beneath her. Joseph caught her, his brow furrowed with concern. "Eva, what is it?" My legs," she stammered, her voice tight with pain. Can't feel them." Her eyes widened with fear. "Paralyzed, the chemical. It's affecting me." Joseph cursed under his breath. He was immune thanks to his prior modifications, but Eva, she was vulnerable. He had to protect her. He scanned the area, searching for a safe place, an escape route. Myra, taking a desperate chance, accessed a restricted comm channel, her heart pounding in her chest. "Joseph, raise," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They know about the sabotage. They're bringing my brother in for questioning, and the chemical agent. It targets the nervous system. Eva, she's in danger. I have to go. They'll be here soon." The line went dead. Joseph hoisted Eva onto his back, his muscles straining with the effort. "Hold on," he grunted. "We're getting out of here." He headed back towards the lab, the only place that offered any semblance of protection. They reached the lab, but what they found was not refuge, but ruin. The doors were blasted open, equipment was smashed, and data drives were scattered across the floor. The Crawl had been here, and they had taken everything. Damn it. Joseph roared, his voice echoing in the ruined lab. The data, the antidote. It was all gone, but even as despair threatened to engulf them, the tide was turning. The bioweapon unleashed by the modified drones was taking its toll on the Crawl forces. Reports flooded in of soldiers collapsing, disoriented, their movements sluggish, their weapons failing. The jungle, once their hunting ground, had become their graveyard. Andromeda, his face contorted with rage, thumped his hand on the command console. "Increase the bounty on the humans," he bellowed. 1,000 credits, and initiate a full-scale sweep of the jungle. Leave no stone unturned. In the interrogation chamber, Myra's brother, his face bruised and bloodied, refused to break. He knew what Myra had done. He knew the risk she had taken, and he would not betray her. "Where are they?" The Crawl interrogator snarled, tightening the restraints. "Where is the human base?" He spat in the interrogator's face. "Go to hell." Back in the jungle, Myra, her face streaked with dirt and tears, managed to contact Joseph one last time. "They know," she whispered, her voice trembling. "My brother, he told them. About the secondary base. The one near the mountains. It's more heavily defended, but it holds the key to the antidote and a counter-offensive." Her voice broke. "I'm sorry, Joseph, I'm so sorry." Joseph closed his eyes, his mind racing. The secondary base. It was a long shot. But it was their only shot. He looked at Eva, her face pale and drawn, her body limp in his arms. He had a choice to make, risk everything or die here. He tightened his grip on his weapon, his face hardening with tenacity. "Eva," he said, his voice firm, "we're going to the secondary base. We're going to get that antidote, and then we're going to make them pay." Eva, her eyes filled with pain but also with tenacity, nodded weakly. "I know the terrain," she rasped. "Hidden routes. Through the mountains. I can guide you." And so, with Eva on his back, Joseph plunged back into the jungle, towards the heart of the Krall's defenses, towards a desperate gamble for survival. The tunnel was barely wide enough for Joseph to shuffle through, Eva clinging to his back like a dead weight. The damp air hung thick with the stench of stale, recycled air, and something vaguely metallic. Each labored breath rasped in his ears, amplified by the claustrophobic space. Myra's brother had been right. This maintenance tunnel offered a route into the secondary base, but it was far from easy. Eva coughed, a wet, rattling sound that echoed unnervingly. "Just get me there, Rays," she gasped, her voice strained. "Don't need a tomb." Joseph grunted, adjusting his grip. Her paralysis was worsening rapidly. What had been a limp leg dragging behind them was now an almost complete inability to move her lower body. He was carrying her entirely now. "Almost there, Sergeant. Just a little further." A faint red grid flickered into existence on the tunnel wall ahead. Motion sensors. Krall's security had upgraded since Myra's brother had last used this route. Joseph stopped, pressing himself against the cool, slick metal. He pulled a small device from his belt, a modified EMP grenade designed for pinpoint accuracy. He recalibrated it quickly. "Hold tight." With a soft hiss, the EMP discharged, bathing the tunnel in a momentary pulse of energy. The red grid vanished. "Let's move." They continued, the tunnel opening into a larger access junction. Enhanced patrols. 2 Krall soldiers, their chitinous armor gleaming under harsh fluorescent lights, marched past the junction. Joseph pulled Eva into a shadowed alcove, pressing a hand over her mouth to silence her ragged breathing. He risked a glance. The patrol pattern was predictable but tight. No room for error. He whispered, "I'll distract them. You find cover." Eva shook her head. "No, Cly. Waste of time, I can." She fumbled for her sidearm, a custom-built sniper pistol designed for close-quarters combat. Before Joseph could protest, she raised the pistol, aiming with a steadiness that belied her condition. 2 shots, almost simultaneous, echoed through the junction. The Krall soldiers crumpled, their bodies twitching. "Damn it, Eva," Joseph muttered, but a small smile played on his lips. "Show off." Meanwhile, within the Krall base, Myra navigated the sterile corridors, her heart pounding against her ribs. She had to find her brother, get him out before Andromeda used him further. She reached the holding cells, her access card granting her entry. But as she deactivated the energy field surrounding his cell, a klaxon blared. Red lights flashed. She'd been detected. Joseph and Eva reached the lab. Rows of humming servers lined the walls, bathed in the cold blue light of data streams. Technicians, their faces obscured by data visors, worked with feverish intensity. The antidote data was here, but it was heavily encrypted. A holographic display showed layer upon layer of security protocols. "Damn," Joseph said, frustration lacing his voice. "We need an access code." Eva, slumped against a server rack, her face pale with pain, coughed again. "Look, ventilation, above the server racks." She pointed a trembling finger towards a series of grates high on the wall. "Structural weakness leads directly to server room bypasses." Encryption. Joseph followed her gaze. The ventilation system. Another gamble, but they were running out of time. "Cover me." As Myra was dragged away by Krall guards, she subtly kicked a power conduit, sending a surge through the communication system. Sparks flew, and the comms screen flickered before going dark. A small act of defiance, but it would buy them time. Delay Andromeda's response, even by a few precious minutes. Joseph scaled the server racks, his movements quick and precise. He reached the ventilation grate, wrenching it open with a grunt. The air inside was thick with dust and the metallic tang of ozone. He squeezed inside, pulling himself through the narrow duct. Automated defense turrets swiveled into view, their barrels gleaming menacingly. Targeting lasers painted red dots on his chest. Outside the lab, Eva, propped against the wall, braced herself. Despite her worsening paralysis, her eyes were sharp, her aim unwavering. She fired, a series of precise shots that shattered the targeting sensors on the turrets. One by one, the automated defenses went offline. Inside the server room, Joseph reached the central server cluster. He jacked in his data interface, bypassing the remaining security protocols. The antidote data streamed into his device along with something else. A file buried deep within the crawl network, Project Black Rain. He opened it, schematics, troop deployments, target zones. His blood ran cold, a full-scale crawl invasion of Earth. He downloaded both files, triggering an alarm. Sirens wailed and the lights flickered. He was out of time. In the interrogation room, Andromeda loomed over Myra, his mandibles clicking in anger. "Where is the delivery system for the bio-weapon, Prilorian? Tell me, or your brother will suffer." He gestured towards the observation window, where her brother was being held by two crawl guards. Myra glared at him, her voice filled with defiance. "Go to hell, Andromeda." Outside the server room, Eva fought to hold off the approaching crawl forces. A plasma bolt seared across her chest, knocking her back against the wall. She cried out in pain, but her grip on her pistol remained firm. Joseph burst from the server room, grabbing Eva and dragging her towards the exit. "We have to go." He quickly set a series of charges on the main power conduits. "This place is coming down." He didn't wait to see the results, sprinting towards the jungle, dragging Eva. Just before leaving, he grabbed a young crawl soldier and threw him over his shoulder. They plunged into the dense undergrowth, the sounds of the exploding base echoing behind them. Debris rained down, scattering the pursuing crawl forces. As they fled, a figure emerged from the jungle. It was Myra, her brother, at her side. "Joseph, Eva, what the hell are you doing here?" Joseph asked, panting for breath. Myra pointed to the crawl soldier slung over Joseph's shoulder. "That's Andromeda's son," she said. "My brother told me. He's the key to getting us off this rock." The jungle air hung thick and heavy, a suffocating blanket woven with the stench of decaying vegetation and the metallic tang of blood. Joseph, his face grim, ripped a strip of cloth from his own shirt, pressing it against the ragged wound in Eva's side. Her breathing was shallow, each gasp a ragged whisper against the cacophony of the jungle. He secured the bandage as best he could. "We need to stop the bleeding, now," he barked, scanning the dense foliage. "This way. I saw a small clearing not far from here." They moved quickly, Joseph half carrying Eva, Myra supporting her other side. Jax, the young crawl, stumbled along, his large eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. The clearing was small, barely large enough to lie down in, but it offered a temporary respite from the claustrophobic jungle. Joseph gently lowered Eva to the ground, his movements precise and efficient. "How bad is it?" Myra asked, her voice tight with anxiety. Joseph didn't sugarcoat it. "Critical. She needs advanced medical care and fast." Myra knelt beside Eva, her slender fingers probing the wound. I have some medical knowledge, basic supplies, but it's not enough, not for this." She pulled out a small medkit, its contents meager. Antibiotics, bandages, a painkiller injector. Joseph nodded grimly. "It'll have to do for now." He spared a glance at the captured crawl data device. "I need to see if I can find anything useful in this. Anything about an antidote." He set up a makeshift terminal using salvaged components from the downed ship. The screen flickered to life, displaying a torrent of alien symbols. The data was heavily encrypted, but Joseph's fingers flew across the interface, his mind racing. Jax watched, his gaze fixed on the human's desperate efforts. He had never seen such concern, such care. Crawl warriors left their wounded. They were a liability. Hours blurred. Joseph, fueled by adrenaline and desperation, cracked the first layer of encryption. Schematics, troop deployments, resource allocations. And then a section labeled Project Chimera. His breath hitched. This was it, details about the toxins, their effects, and an antidote. The synthesis process was complex, requiring specific compounds. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the jungle, the crawl, closing in. "They're searching systematically," Myra said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They'll find us eventually." Myra turned to Joseph, her face etched with a pragmatic determination that chilled him. "We could use him," she said, gesturing towards Jax, "as a bargaining chip for safe passage, for medical supplies." Joseph hesitated. "I don't know, Myra." Eva, her face pale and slick with sweat, stirred. "Don't," she rasped, her voice weak but firm. "Don't compromise yourselves. For me." Her eyes met Joseph's, pleading, "Stay true to who you are." Joseph swallowed hard, his teeth gritted. He couldn't. "All right," he said, his voice low, "we fight." He grabbed his rifle, his eyes scanning their surroundings. "Myra, what can you tell me about the local flora? Anything that can give us an edge?" Myra hesitated, then nodded. "There are certain plants. Highly toxic. Their sap can cause severe burns, paralysis." Joseph's eyes gleamed. "Burns, paralysis. Perfect." He moved quickly, gathering leaves, roots, and minerals. He worked with a focused intensity, modifying their weapons, coating the bullets with a potent neurotoxin, fashioning crude but effective grenades filled with corrosive sap. The first shot rang out, shattering the jungle's silence. A crawl patrol had stumbled upon their camp. "Take cover," Joseph yelled, diving behind a fallen log. The firefight erupted. Crawl warriors, clad in heavy armor, advanced relentlessly, their energy weapons spitting bolts of searing plasma. Joseph and Eva, despite her weakened state, returned fire with deadly accuracy. The modified bullets tore through the crawl armor, the neurotoxin instantly incapacitating their targets. The sap grenades exploded in showers of corrosive liquid, melting armor and flesh alike. Jax watched, transfixed. He had never seen such ferocity, such ingenuity. The crawl fought with brute force, relying on their superior technology. These humans, outnumbered and outgunned, fought with cunning, with desperation, with a courage he had never witnessed before. Myra, meanwhile, tried contacting her brother again. "It's me. I know I shouldn't contact you, but I must warn you. The humans are more intelligent than we give them credit for. The invasion is not going as planned." As the last crawl warrior fell, Joseph surveyed the scene. The jungle floor was littered with bodies, both human and crawl. They had won, but at a cost. "We can't stay here," he said, his voice grim. "They'll send more." He looked at Eva, her face pale and drawn. "We need to find a way to get you medical attention." His gaze hardened, a new dedication in his eyes. "I've also found a vulnerability, a weakness in their shield technology." Eva, despite her pain, managed a weak smile. "Then let's use it," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Jax. He knows their communication protocols. We can use him to send a false signal, lure a ship close enough." Joseph looked at Eva, then at Jax. It was a risky plan, bordering on insane. But it was their only chance. "All right," he said, his voice firm. "Let's do it." Eva, with a strength Joseph didn't think she had, told Jax what to do. Jax, understanding he would die if he did not cooperate, agreed and sent the signal. Myra then set a bomb on the ship with a timer. "If we don't make it, this will ensure all crawl technology is destroyed and unretrievable." The team waited. A crawl ship soon arrived. Joseph sabotaged the shields, allowing Eva to be beamed to the ship. After Eva was beamed, the timer on the bomb went off. The ship was drawn away and exploded by the team. Joseph turned to Myra. "I know of another colony. That's where we're going next." The acrid smell of burnt circuitry stung Joseph's nostrils. Sparks still flickered from a severed conduit near the navigation console. The explosion had ripped through the makeshift ship with the force of a disgruntled god. He ran a diagnostic, the holographic display flickering erratically. Hull integrity at 70%. Life support. Stable, for now. Engines are still functional, but power output is fluctuating. Eva coughed, a ragged, wet sound that echoed in the cramped cockpit. Her face was flushed and beads of sweat dotted her brow. "Damn it," she rasped, clutching her side. This is getting old fast." The infection was spreading, its tendrils tightening around her body, each breath a battle. Joseph turned from the console, his face grim. "We need to get you to that colony, Eva, soon." He began sifting through the data salvaged from the destroyed crawl ship, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. Lines of code blurred before his eyes as he searched for anything useful. "Got something," he announced, his voice tight with focus. "Coordinates for another human colony, and details about crawl patrol routes in this sector." Myra approached, her brow furrowed. "The second colony. It's rumored to have advanced medical facilities, but it's also said to be heavily fortified. There are whispers of experiments." A shadow crossed her face, a flicker of unease. It may not be a safe haven. Joseph weighed the risks. Eva's life hung in the balance. "We don't have a choice. We reroute. Jax, you got anything to add?" Jax's voice crackled over the comms, his tone surprisingly steady. "I do. Crawl communication frequencies. They use a rotating encryption key, but I managed to isolate the primary sequence. It will help you avoid detection. For a while." He rattled off a string of numbers and frequencies. As Joseph input the new course, his eyes caught something in the crawl data. A hidden file buried deep within the system logs. He decrypted it, his brow furrowing as he read. "There's a message here, a coded distress signal. It seems there may be a rebellion brewing among the enslaved species under crawl control." The information was fragmented, incomplete, but the implications were staggering. A sudden jolt threw them against their restraints. Alarms blared as the ship shuddered violently. "Asteroid field," Myra shouted over the din. "We're entering the asteroid field." Joseph wrestled with the controls, his nucleus tightening. The ship bucked and weaved as he navigated through the treacherous debris field. A large asteroid loomed ahead, its surface scarred and pitted. He tried to steer clear, but it was too late. A grinding screech filled the cockpit as the ship collided with the asteroid, sending sparks flying and shaking them to their core. "Navigation system is failing," Eva yelled, her voice strained. "The impact damaged the gyroscopic stabilizers. We're losing control." Despite her pain, she leaned forward, her eyes narrowed in concentration. "There, the primary regulator. It's cracked." "Bypass it with a manual override. Quick, Joseph." Even as Joseph worked feverishly to reroute the power, a new alarm shrieked. "Crawl contact," Myra shouted, her voice imbued with urgency. "They've detected our signal. They're pursuing us." The holographic display showed 2 crawl cruisers closing in, their weapons systems charging. Joseph knew they couldn't outrun them in their damaged ship. He scanned the asteroid field, his mind racing. There, he pointed to a narrow crevice in a massive asteroid barely wide enough for the ship to fit through. "We're going through that." "Are you insane?" Myra exclaimed, her eyes wide with disbelief. "It's suicide." "Maybe," Joseph said grimly, "but it's our only chance." He steered the ship towards the crevice, his hands steady on the controls. The ship plunged into the darkness, the walls of the asteroid closing in around them. The passage was tight, the ship scraping against the rock, showering them with dust and debris. Eva groaned in pain, her breath shallow and ragged. I can't." "Much further," she gasped, her eyes fluttering closed. "Just leave me behind." Joseph gripped the controls tighter, his teeth gritted. "We're not leaving you, Eva." Myra looked at Eva, then at Joseph, a determined glint in her eyes. "Jax provided crawl communication frequencies, correct? We can use them to send a distress signal. To the colony, we lure them into an ambush." Joseph nodded slowly. "It's risky, but it might work." He glanced at Myra, but before you send it, add this. He dictated a series of seemingly random numbers and letters, a coded message known only to the residents of the colony. As Myra prepared the transmission, Joseph scanned the surrounding asteroids. He stopped, his gaze fixed on a small, seemingly unremarkable rock. There, he said, pointing to the asteroid. A hidden Kraul listening post. They're using it to monitor human communications. What do you suggest? Asked Myra. We infiltrate it, said Joseph, his eyes glinting with commitment. Disable it, gather intelligence. It could give us the edge we need. The airlock hissed open, releasing them into the cramped, dimly lit corridor of the Kraul listening post. Jax's frequency manipulations had worked. The initial security grid remained blissfully unaware of their intrusion. Eva leaned heavily against the wall, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Go, she rasped, her face pale. I'll cover your backs, just try not to take all day. She found a shadowed alcove overlooking a junction, bracing herself against the wall, rifle raised. Her eyes, though clouded with pain, were sharp and focused. East corridor. Server rooms that way. I'll keep comms open. Joseph nodded grimly at Myra and moved forward, his hand instinctively resting on the pulse rifle slung across his chest. Myra, her face tight with apprehension, followed closely, her fingers flying across her wrist-mounted datapad. Inside the server room, banks of glowing consoles hummed with Kraul activity. Myra bypassed a security lock with practiced ease and accessed the main data stream. Lines of alien code scrolled across her screen, a chaotic jumble that slowly dedicationed into recognizable schematics and tactical readouts. Joseph, look at this, she murmured, her voice tinged with a chilling realization. They know everything, our patrol routes, defense grid placements, even the fallback positions. The data painted a grim picture. The Kraul hadn't just stumbled upon the colony, they had dissected it, analyzed its weaknesses, and planned their invasion with meticulous precision. A new alert flashed on Myra's screen, a heavily encrypted file buried deep within the Kraul data banks. This is odd, she said, her brow furrowed. It's heavily fragmented, almost as if someone tried to hide it or corrupt it. As she began the decryption process, her expression shifted from tie to horror. Number, this can't be. She looked up at Joseph, her eyes wide with disbelief. The colony. They're not sending a rescue party. They're preparing an ambush. They think our distress signal is a Kraul trap. They're going to use our ship to escape the planet. The air hung heavy with the weight of the revelation. Betrayal, sharp and unexpected, cut through Joseph's willpower. Damn it, he muttered, clenching his fist. They think we're compromised. There's more, Myra said, her fingers still dancing across the datapad. The Kraul. They know about the hidden message in the distress signal. They're trying to use a counter signal to override it. A flicker of movement caught Joseph's eye. He grabbed Myra's arm, pulling her behind a stack of deactivated servers. Down, someone's coming. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. A gruff voice barked orders in Kraul, followed by the clatter of armor. Routine inspection, Myra whispered, her voice barely audible. High-ranking officer. Eva's voice crackled in their comms. Got movement heading your way, looks like a big one. I can draw them off, but it'll be loud. Do it, Eva, Joseph replied, his mind already racing. Now. A moment later, a muffled explosion rocked the listening post, followed by a chorus of alarms. The lights flickered and died, plunging the server room into near darkness. The Kraul officer roared in fury, his voice echoing through the corridors. Taking advantage of the chaos, Joseph moved swiftly, disabling the remaining Kraul technicians with a series of precise strikes. Myra secured the data ports, her fingers flying across the controls. I've got it, she said, her voice tight with urgency. But there's something else. The hidden data. It reveals their plan. They're planning to use a biological weapon against the colony. What kind of weapon? Joseph asked, his voice grim. Myra's face contorted in a mixture of horror and disbelief. It's designed to target human DNA. but the initial projections show. Prilorians are equally vulnerable. The weapon will kill Prilorians as well. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. The Krall's alliance with the Prilorians was a lie, a cynical manipulation to achieve their own ends. Any trust that might have begun to form between them was shattered. "There's more," she said, her voice shaking slightly. The encrypted files also show the enslaved species rebellion is planned to coincide with the Krall attack on the colony. It will cause confusion, but they are understaffed and under-equipped. It won't last long. Joseph swore under his breath. "Double cross." Myra continued, and the counter signal. "It will target not just the colony. It's keyed to our ship's signature since it has been transmitting the original distress signal. It will follow us." Eva's voice, strained and weak, cut through the tense silence. "Guys, I don't have much time. This wound. It's getting bad. I need treatment. Now." Joseph glanced at Myra, his face etched with concern. "We have to warn the colony," he said, his voice resolute. "Even if it's a trap." Myra nodded slowly, her expression grim. "Agreed, but after this I am done working with the Krall. Done." They transmitted a warning message to the human colony, relaying the information about the biological weapon and the counter signal. The response was immediate but chilling. "We have received your warning," a voice crackled back, devoid of warmth. "We will meet you at designated coordinates. Sector Gamma 9, Grid 47. Do not approach the colony. We believe there may be other survivors, Prilorians or other slaves. That is our only hope of getting off planet." The message ended abruptly, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. There was no mention of medical assistance for Eva. As they moved back through the corridors, Myra paused, her hand resting on the control panel of the listening post. "We can't let them use this again," she said, her voice hard. Joseph nodded. "Do it." Myra initiated a cascading system failure, wiping the databanks and overloading the power grid. As they slipped back into the jungle, they heard the listening post groan and shudder, its systems collapsing in a spectacular cascade of sparks and smoke. As they moved away from the post, Eva spoke urgently. "I'm detecting multiple Krall signatures, closing fast." Joseph looked back at the destruction as they vanished back into the jungle. The jungle clawed at them, vines snagging on their gear, the humid air thick and heavy. Each step was a battle against the oppressive vegetation, a symphony of rustling leaves, buzzing insects, and Eva's ragged breaths. Joseph adjusted his grip on Eva, her weight a constant reminder of their dwindling time. Eva coughed, a wet, rattling sound that sent a shiver down Joseph's spine. Her face was pale, slick with sweat. "Can't breathe," she gasped, her voice a strained whisper. Joseph stopped, his gaze sweeping the dense foliage. "Myra, anything we can use?" Myra scanned the surrounding plants, her Prilorian eyes sharp and focused. "This vine," she said, pointing to a thick, rubbery growth. "The sap is rich in oxygen, and these leaves. They contain compounds that can dilate the airways." Working quickly, Joseph crushed the leaves, mixing them with the vine's sap. He fashioned a crude mask from scavenged fabric and applied the paste around its edges, creating a seal. He placed it over Eva's mouth and nose. "Breathe, Eva, just breathe." Eva inhaled deeply, her chest rising and falling with slightly less effort. "Thanks," she rasped, her grip tightening on Joseph's arm. A faint clicking sound reached Myra's sensitive ears. "Krall patrol," she hissed, approaching from the east, less than 100 meters. They scrambled for cover, squeezing into a dense patch of ferns and broad-leafed plants. Joseph positioned himself between Eva and the approaching threat, his pulse rifle raised. "I can draw them away," he whispered. "There's a cluster of those luminescent fungi a short distance that way. If I disturb them, they'll release a cloud of spores. The Krall are sensitive to it." Myra nodded. "Go, but be careful." Joseph moved silently through the undergrowth, circling around the patrol. He found the fungi, their caps glowing with an eerie green light. With a swift kick, he sent them tumbling, releasing a cloud of shimmering spores into the air. A chorus of guttural curses erupted from the crawl patrol as they stumbled into the spore cloud, their breathing ragged, their vision blurred. They moved away from the group. As the crawl moved away, they tripped a line. A series of explosions rattled through the jungle, the ground shaking beneath their feet. The crawl screamed and some of them died in the explosions. "What was that?" Myra asked, her voice tight with concern. "Booby traps," Joseph said grimly, rejoining them. "Old ones, this colony. There's more to it than we thought." The jungle grew more treacherous with each step. Towering trees dripped with viscous sap and the air hung thick with the stench of decay. Toxic plants lined their path, their leaves shimmering with an oily sheen. Eva stumbled, her legs buckling beneath her. Joseph caught her, lowering her gently to the ground. Her breath came in shallow gasps. I can't," she whispered, her eyes glazed with pain. "Just leave me." "Not an option, Sergeant," Joseph said firmly. "We need to find a safe place, somewhere we can stabilize you." Myra scanned the surroundings, her gaze drawn to a dark opening in a nearby cliff face. "There," she said, pointing. "A cave system. It could provide shelter." But as they approached the cave entrance, a low growl echoed from within. Two pairs of glowing eyes emerged from the darkness, followed by hulking figures covered in matted fur and razor-sharp claws. Mutated creatures, twisted and warped by the planet's unique ecosystem. "Stay behind me," Joseph ordered, raising his pulse rifle. The creatures lunged, their claws tearing at the air. Joseph opened fire, the pulse rifle spitting bolts of energy. Eva, despite her condition, drew her sidearm, firing with surprising accuracy. "I can help," Myra said, her fingers flying over a salvaged crawl grenade. "I can reprogram it to emit a sonic pulse. It should drive them off." While Joseph and Eva held off the creatures, Myra worked feverishly, rerouting the grenade's circuitry. With a final adjustment, she activated the device. A high-pitched whine filled the air, building to an unbearable crescendo. The mutated creatures recoiled, their eyes wide with pain. They turned and fled back into the darkness of the cave. "Let's go," Joseph said, pushing Eva forward. Inside the cave, the air was cool and damp, the silence broken only by the drip of water. Torches flared to life, revealing walls covered in strange symbols and intricate carvings. "Prilorian," Myra breathed, her voice filled with awe. "These are ancient Prilorian ruins. I don't understand." Eva leaned against a wall, her face pale but her eyes sharp. "Don't act so surprised. This planet, it's always been more than just a colony. We knew about the plants, the toxins. We were sent here to weaponize them." Joseph stared at Eva, his expression hardening. "What are you talking about?" "Classified military project," Eva said, her voice tight. "Top secret. I wasn't supposed to say anything." "The Prilorians were betrayed by the Crawl," Myra said, her voice rising. "They were allies, partners, and then the Crawl turned on them, slaughtered them, stole their technology." "Maybe it was for the best," Joseph interjected. "Maybe the Prilorians had it coming." "How can you say that?" Myra snapped, her eyes flashing with anger. "You don't understand what it's like to be betrayed, to have your entire history erased." Joseph sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, we need to focus on Eva. Arguing about ancient history isn't going to help her." Using the ruins' smooth rock surfaces and salvaged equipment, they created a makeshift medical bay for Eva. But they lacked essential supplies: antibiotics, painkillers, a proper oxygen tank. Suddenly, a series of beeps echoed through the cave. Myra rushed to a console, her fingers flying over the controls. "An automated message," she said, her voice trembling, "sent long ago." The message crackled to life, a distorted voice filling the cave. "Quarantine protocol activated. Colony designated. Expendable. Do not attempt. Rescue. Repeat. Do not attempt rescue." Myra stared at the console, her face white with shock. "It was a trap," she whispered. "This entire colony. It was designed to lure the Crawl here and kill them. We're expendable." Joseph clenched his fists, his teeth clenched with anger. "Then we'll make them pay. will use their own weapons against them. He turned to the surrounding flora, his eyes gleaming with perseverance. I can create a smaller dose of the Crawl bioweapon, something that will weaken them, buy us some time. And I can create a signal beacon, Myra said, her voice regaining its strength. Something that will draw them out, leave them open to a trap. As they approached the designated meeting point, the jungle grew eerily silent. The air hung heavy with the stench of death. They found signs of a recent battle, scorched earth, shattered trees, and the mangled corpses of Crawl soldiers. Damaged human defense systems lay scattered across the landscape. It's been hit, Joseph said grimly. The colony, it's already been attacked. The meeting point. It's likely a trap, Myra added, her voice filled with dread. Myra was accessing a file from the colony when she gasped. This message that was supposed to tell us about the colony, it was actually meant to send to the colony so they would all die when the Crawl arrived. There's a traitor. A twig snapped behind them. They whirled around, weapons raised. A figure emerged from the shadows, their face hidden beneath a hooded cloak. They stepped into the torchlight, revealing themselves as a member of the colony, armed and hostile. The colonist burst from the jungle's edge, a woman, her face streaked with mud and desperation. A rusty pulse rifle bucked in her hands, spitting wild shots towards them. "Stay back, you don't understand. It's not safe." Her voice was raw, cracking with exhaustion. Joseph moved first, a blur of controlled motion. He sidestepped the erratic fire, closing the distance in a heartbeat. Eva was right behind him, rifle raised but not firing. "Hold your fire. We're not here to hurt you," Joseph called out, his voice calm but firm. He reached the woman, grabbing the barrel of her rifle and twisting. She fought back with surprising strength, but Joseph's grip was unyielding. With a final wrench, he disarmed her, tossing the weapon aside. Eva moved in, securing her arms. The woman struggled, panting, her eyes wide with fear. "Let me go, they'll find them, they'll kill them all," she screamed, tears welling in her eyes. "Who will find who?" Joseph asked, his voice softening slightly. "We're here to help, just tell us what's going on." The woman's resistance crumbled. She sagged against Eva, her body trembling. "Survivors, there are other survivors, the Crawl, and the flora, it's weaponized, he did it. He sent the message to the Crawl. Eva pressed, her gaze sharp. The woman swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. "Dr. Thorne, Aris Thorne. He was the chief scientist. He knew about the flora, he said it was too dangerous. That humanity shouldn't use it. He sabotaged the defenses, sent a message to the Crawl promising little resistance if they took him alive, and he hid the survivors." Myra stepped forward, her Pylorian features impassive. Why would he betray his own people? "He believes the flora should be destroyed, not weaponized," the woman explained, her voice infused with bitterness. "He thinks it's better for everyone to die than for the Crawl or anyone else to control it. He is insane." She looked up at Joseph, her eyes pleading. "They need help, the survivors, and Thorne. He's still out there trying to destroy everything." "What do you want us to do?" Joseph asked, his eyes assessing. "Help me stop him," the woman pleaded. "Help me protect the others, I can take you to them. There's a hidden cache of supplies, but you have to help me." Joseph nodded. "We'll help you, but first we need to get you patched up." He gestured to the wound on her arm. "What's your name?" "Leela," she said, her voice regaining a sliver of strength. The journey through the jungle was slow and arduous. Leela, despite her wound, insisted on leading the way, her knowledge of the terrain proving invaluable. But the jungle itself seemed to resist them, the vegetation thicker, the air heavier, the sounds more ominous. They pushed through tangled vines and waded through stagnant pools, the oppressive humidity clinging to them like a shroud. Then they saw it, a patch of flora unlike any they'd encountered before. The leaves were a deep, almost black purple, and they pulsed with a faint internal light. Spores drifted lazily in the air, shimmering with an oily sheen. Eva stopped dead, her face paling. That's different. Thorne's work," Leela said, her voice grim. He's been experimenting, making it stronger, more aggressive. Eva stared at the flora, her eyes unfocused. A tremor ran through her body. Project Chimera. I remember. The words were fragments, whispers of a buried memory. A flash of sterile white walls, masked faces, and a searing pain in her arm. The screams of others cut short. Failure. Myra, scanning the area with her sensors, interrupted Eva's reverie. Incoming. Large crawl patrol, approximately 200 meters, closing fast. They are moving in a sweeping pattern. The choice hung in the air, heavy and unavoidable. Save the survivors or avoid capture. They couldn't do both. Joseph's face was grim. Eva, you and Leela get the survivors to safety. Use the cache. Myra and I will create a diversion, draw the crawl away. Are you sure, Joseph? Eva asked, her voice tight with concern. It's the only way, Joseph said, his gaze unwavering. We'll meet you at the cache. Go. Eva nodded, her face set with purpose. She helped Leela to her feet, and together they disappeared into the dense undergrowth, leaving Joseph and Myra alone. We need to set a trap, Joseph said, his eyes scanning the area. Use the flora, the ruins, anything we can find. Working quickly and efficiently, they transformed the area into a death trap. Joseph coated sharpened sticks with the toxic spores, creating a minefield of deadly spikes. Myra reconfigured the ruins' automated defenses, turning them against the crawl. They worked in silence, their movements fluid and coordinated, their minds focused on the task at hand. The crawl patrol blundered into the trap exactly as planned. The air filled with the screams of dying crawl soldiers, the stench of burning flesh, and the crackle of energy weapons. The ambush was a success, but the noise had attracted unwanted attention. A voice, amplified by a hidden speaker, echoed through the jungle. Impressive but futile. Your resistance is meaty, Dr. S. Dr. Thorne stepped out of the shadows, flanked by a group of armed loyalists. His face was gaunt, his eyes burning with fanaticism. I offered them a chance for peace. They refused. Now all must die. You're insane, Thorne, Joseph said, his voice low and dangerous. These people are our home. You cannot let the crawl win. Winning is irrelevant, Thorne countered, his voice cold. The flora cannot be allowed to fall into anyone's hands, not even ours. I will destroy it all, even if it means destroying everything else. Thorne lunged forward, his movements surprisingly fast. He struck with a modified vibroblade, aiming for Joseph's throat. Joseph barely managed to parry the blow, the force of the impact sending a jolt up his arm. You're stronger than you should be, Joseph said, his eyes narrowing. I've adapted, Thorne hissed, his face contorted with rage. I've modified myself to survive this planet, to complete my mission. Thorne pressed his attack, his movements relentless. Joseph fought back, but Thorne's enhanced strength and speed were overwhelming. Myra watched helplessly, unable to get a clear shot. Then, as Thorne raised his vibroblade for a final strike, Myra acted. She fired a pulse of energy from her wrist-mounted weapon, hitting Thorne square in the chest. He staggered back, clutching his chest, his face contorted in pain. I recalibrated my weapon to disrupt the modifications, Myra said, her voice calm. I am sorry, Doctor, but you are wrong. Thorne laughed, a hollow, broken sound. Too late. It's already done. He pressed a button on a small detonator in his hand. The jungle erupted in a blinding flash of light and a deafening roar. The ground shook violently, sending them sprawling. The air filled with smoke and debris. Joseph felt himself lifted off his feet, tossed through the air like a rag doll. He slammed into a tree, the impact knocking the wind out of him. He struggled to his feet, his head spinning, his vision blurred. Myra was nowhere to be seen. Eva, leading Leela and the survivors through the undergrowth, stopped abruptly. A low rumble vibrated through the ground, growing steadily louder. What was that? One of the survivors asked, his voice trembling. Then came the explosion. A shockwave ripped through the jungle, shaking the trees and sending debris raining down around them. No! Leela cried, her face etched with despair. Eva gripped her rifle, her squeezing hard. The ground beneath their feet trembled, and a deep, guttural roar echoed from the depths of the ruins. She saw a previously unknown tunnel network opening up in the earth before her, with a set of stairs leading downward. "Move!" she screamed. "Move now!" As they fled into the darkness, the sound of the explosion still ringing in their ears, Joseph coughed, the metallic tang of blood filling his mouth. His head throbbed, a dull, persistent ache that resonated with the ringing in his ears. Disoriented, he pushed himself up, his muscles screaming in protest. The laboratory was a ruin, sparking wires dangling from the ceiling, shattered equipment strewn across the floor. Myra lay nearby, still unconscious. He crawled to her side, his bio-engineered senses kicking in, overriding the pain. He scanned her for injuries, his fingers tracing the delicate Prilorian bone structure of her face, finding a gash on her forehead. He ripped a piece of his sleeve, already stained with his own blood, and pressed it against the wound, applying pressure. His knowledge of xenobiology, usually theoretical, now became a desperate lifeline. He located a pressure point near her temple, gently applying pressure to stimulate her respiratory system. A voice, raspy but familiar, cut through the ringing in his ears. "Impressive, Rays. Even injured, you still play the hero." Thorn stood near the doorway, seemingly unharmed. A faint shimmer clung to his form, a personal shield. "Did you really think a little explosion could stop me?" "I've been planning this for years." He gestured to a device in his hand, a small metallic sphere humming with contained energy. "This will trigger a chain reaction in the flora, burn it all. No more toxins, no more crawl advantage." "You'll kill everything," Joseph rasped, struggling to his feet. "Collateral damage," Thorn sneered. "A necessary sacrifice for humanity's future." Joseph lunged, pain be damned. Thorn, augmented far beyond human capability, met him with surprising strength. The fight was brutal, confined to the wreckage of the lab. Thorn's enhanced muscles slammed Joseph against a console, cracking the already weakened structure. Joseph, relying on instinct and training, targeted Thorn's joints, using the limited space to his advantage. He kicked out Thorn's knee, the sickening crack echoing in the ruined lab. Thorn roared in pain and rage, momentarily dropping the sphere. Joseph seized the opportunity, grabbing the device and slamming it against the floor. Cracks spiderwebbed across its surface, the humming intensifying before sputtering and dying. "You fool!" Thorn shrieked, scrambling for the damaged device. Joseph tackled him, but Thorn, fueled by desperation, threw him off. He grabbed the sphere and fled deeper into the ruins. Joseph, bruised and bleeding, turned back to Myra, who was stirring. "Thorn's got a device," he said, his voice strained. "He's going to destroy the flora. We have to stop him." Myra groaned, pushing herself up. "He's insane. The consequences." "We don't have a choice," Joseph said, offering her a hand. "He's a threat to everyone." Meanwhile, deeper within the complex, Eva Rostova barked orders. "Move, now, get the wounded through first." She directed the colonists, a motley group of survivors, deeper into the tunnel network. "We'll use the tunnels as a fallback position." A tremor ran through the ground, dust falling from the ceiling. The tunnel behind them collapsed, a cascade of rock and debris sealing off their retreat. "Damn it," Eva cursed. "The whole place is unstable." As they pressed forward, the narrow tunnel opened into a small cavern, and waiting for them crawled scouts, 3 of them, weapons raised. "Crawl!" a colonist screamed. Eva reacted instantly, shoving the colonist behind her and firing her pulse rifle. The tunnel erupted in gunfire, the confined space amplifying the sound. Eva moved with practiced precision, taking down one crawl with a burst to the chest. The other 2 returned fire, energy bolts ricocheting off the tunnel walls. She rolled behind a makeshift barricade of crates, returning fire. The crawl were relentless, their guttural snarls echoing through the tunnel. She risked a glance behind her. The colonists were huddled together, terrified. She had to protect them. "This way!" Eva yelled, firing a suppressing burst as she led the colonists through a narrow side passage. As they moved, Eva noticed something. The Crawl weren't just patrolling, they were deliberately navigating the tunnels, heading towards a specific destination. They're using the tunnels to bypass our defenses, she realized. One of the wounded colonists, a grizzled old man named Ben, clutched his side, his face pale. "Sergeant," he gasped, I don't think I'm going to make it." Eva knelt beside him, examining his wound. The blast had torn through his abdomen. "Hang in there, Ben," she said, her voice strained. Ben coughed, blood trickling from his lips. Thorn, he knew, he set a failsafe. If the plants were ever destroyed, he'd flood the tunnels with toxins. He coughed again, his eyes glazing over. He was always crazy. His hand went limp. Up above, Joseph and Myra followed Thorn's trail, the air thick with dust and the acrid smell of ozone. They reached a large chamber, the walls lined with ancient Prilorian glyphs. In the center, Thorn was frantically working at a control panel, his fingers flying across the alien symbols. "Thorn, stop!" Joseph yelled, but Thorn ignored him, his eyes fixated on the panel. "It's too late, Rays," Thorn said, his voice filled with manic energy. "I've already initiated the chain reaction. The plants are dying. Soon this whole planet will be cleansed." Joseph lunged, grabbing Thorn's arm, but it was too late. The control panel flashed and a low, guttural hum filled the chamber. A high-pitched whine sounded through the tunnels. Down below in the tunnels, Eva felt a subtle shift in the air. A faint, sweet odor like decaying flowers began to permeate the tunnel. "What's that smell?" a colonist asked, coughing. Eva frowned, her senses on high alert. Toxins, she realized, her blood running cold. Thorn's failsafe. Panic erupted among the colonists. They coughed, their eyes watering. Several collapsed, their bodies convulsing. "The air filtration systems are failing," Eva shouted. "We have to get out of here." Back in the control room, Myra studied the Prilorian glyphs on the walls. "Joseph, look, this control room. It can redirect the toxin flow. We can vent it into the tunnels." "Do it," Joseph yelled, grappling with Thorn. Eva, pushing through the chaos, rounded a bend in the tunnel and stopped dead in her tracks. Before her stretched a vast cavern, illuminated by Crawl floodlights. Hundreds of Crawl soldiers stood in formation, weapons at the ready. A massive Crawl staging area, far larger than anything they had anticipated. The air burned. Joseph choked, his augmented lungs screaming for clean oxygen that wasn't there. Myra coughed beside him, her Prilorian physiology clearly faring no better. The weaponized flora, even in a diluted concentration, was vicious. They clawed at the control panel, fingers slick with sweat, trying to override the automated systems. Below, in the Prilorian tunnels that served as a staging area, the comm crackled in Eva's ear. "We're pinned, Rays, they just keep coming." Plasma fire sizzled past her helmet, impacting the tunnel wall with molten splashes. "Looks like Andromeda wants us real bad." Eva risked a glance. The Crawl were relentless, their guttural roars echoing in the confined space, but something was off. These weren't the elite shock troops they'd faced before. These were poorly equipped, less armor, less sophisticated weaponry. "Rays," she said, her voice tight, "these Crawl, they're second stringers, what's going on?" Up in the control room, Joseph hit his fist on the console. "Got it, rerouting airflow, diverting toxins into lower levels." A klaxon blared and the lights flickered violently. "It's working, but the system's fried. This is temporary." "Temporary ain't gonna cut it," Eva spat. Joseph's voice came back, strained but clear. "This control room, it's not just for ventilation. It's linked to the entire colony's environmental grid. I might be able to do more." Eva didn't wait for details. "Fall back." She barked at her squad. "Demo charges, set 'em and forget 'em." They scrambled back, planting grenades on the tunnel supports. The resulting explosions shook the ground, collapsing sections of the tunnel and buying them precious time, but further complicating their escape. "Rays," Eva said, panting. "Crawl are prepping a mass transport. Looks like they're gonna try and flood the surface. Joseph's voice was grim. I think I know why. He was staring at a series of encrypted Prylorian logs, their alien script swirling across the screen. Myra, can you translate? Myra, still coughing, nodded. Give me a moment. Prylorian military protocols, xenobiological warfare, flora, toxins. Her eyes widened. Joseph, these logs, they detail the weaponized flora. It's keyed to crawl DNA, harmless to almost everything else. Joseph stared at the screen, comprehension dawning. This colony, it wasn't just a colony, it was a weapon. A biological failsafe designed to eradicate the crawl in a last-ditch scenario. A shout from the tunnels interrupted him. Sergeant, we found something. It was Thorn. A hidden cache, Prylorian weapons, armor. Hope surged through Eva. About damn time. Suddenly, a shadow fell across Joseph and Myra. Thorn stood in the doorway, a plasma pistol leveled. I can't let you do that. Eva's team, now clad in sleek black Prylorian armor, moved into position near the transport bay entrance. The armor was a perfect fit, almost like it was waiting for them. All right, people, Eva said, her voice amplified by the suit's comm system. Remember the plan, delay them. Don't let them reach the surface. Thorn's face was pale, his eyes burning with fanaticism. You don't understand, they can't be allowed to live, not a single one. He gestured with the pistol. I was part of the original colonization team. We knew this day might come. We prepared. Myra stepped forward, her hands raised. Thorn, stop. You're dooming this colony. You'll ignite a galactic war. Joseph, his mind racing, saw his chance. He lunged for the environmental controls, overriding the safety protocols. Sorry, Thorn, he said, his voice tight, but I'm not letting you commit planetary genocide. He targeted Thorn with a concentrated burst of the weaponized flora's toxins, flooding the control room with a green mist. Below, the ground vibrated. The crawl transports were powering up. Eva braced herself, her finger on the trigger of her plasma rifle. Here they come. Thorn staggered back, clutching his throat, but a manic grin stretched across his face. Too late, he rasped. Failsafe activated. With a final surge of strength, he banged his hand on a hidden button. A low hum filled the air. Planet-wide distribution. Initiated. The ground vibrated as the planet-wide toxin distribution system roared to life. A low hum resonated through the control room, vibrating up through Joseph's boots. Outside, a visible shimmer spread across the jungle canopy, the air itself thickening with unseen particles. The scent of ozone and something akin to overripe fruit filled the air vents. Eva's voice crackled over the comms. Toxins live. Let the party begin. Then, the staccato bursts of Prylorian pulse rifles. The ambush was immediate, brutal. The ascending crawl forces, caught in the open as they scaled the overgrown cliffs, were shredded by concentrated fire. Blue energy bolts carved through their ranks, sending bodies tumbling back down into the dense undergrowth. Crawl down, crawl down. Rostova's voice was a clipped, efficient snarl. They're bunched up like bantha fodder. Keep the pressure on. The initial surprise wouldn't last. Even through the comms, Joseph could hear the guttural roars of the crawl as they rallied, their heavy weapons spitting green plasma bolts that chewed through the hastily erected barricades. They're adapting, Myra said, her fingers flying across the console. Adjusting their formations, concentrating fire on the high ground. Joseph watched the tactical display, the green dots representing Eva's team flickering under the onslaught of red. Eva, report, he barked into the comm. Prylorian armors holding against standard crawl rifles, came the reply, punctuated by the shriek of ricocheting plasma. But their heavy cannons are another story. We need to move or we're going to get turned into paste. Joseph zoomed in on the planet map, the network of terraforming towers now highlighted in pulsing blue. They were massive structures, ancient even by Prylorian standards, their purpose lost to time until now. The distribution system, Myra said, tracing a finger across the schematic. It's all centered on these towers. They're the key. Outside, the jungle was changing. The toxin was doing its work, accelerating the growth cycle of the planet's flora with alarming speed. Vines thickened, strangling trees in a matter of minutes. Flowers bloomed in vibrant, unnatural colors, their petals dripping with viscous fluids. Eva's voice, strained now, cut through the rising tension. Something's happening to the crawl, there. Changing, getting bigger, angrier. A garbled transmission followed, filled with screams and the sounds of tearing metal. Then silence. Jones, report. Eva's voice was tight with panic, static. Joseph felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. The toxin wasn't just killing the crawl, it was altering them. The toxin, he said, his voice grim. It's not just a poison, it's rewriting their DNA. Myra's eyes widened. The Prilorians, they never intended this. This wasn't just terraforming, it was weaponization on a planetary scale. Myra's fingers danced across the console. There's a failsafe, a protocol to neutralize the toxin, but it requires a complex sequence of commands and a Prilorian genetic signature. The towers were the problem and the solution, but reaching them would be suicide. The crawl would be guarding them heavily. They're going to be expecting us, Joseph murmured. We use what we know they don't, Joseph continued, his gaze returning to the rapidly evolving jungle outside the control room window. The flora, we use the accelerated growth, create natural barriers, traps. He switched comm channels. Eva, fall back, use the vegetation, create ambushes. Slow them down. Understood, Eva replied, her voice grim but resolute. We'll give them a green hell. Back in the control room, Myra's face was grim. The failsafe. I can't activate it. It requires a Prilorian genetic signature. I no longer have one. Not after what I've done. Then we'll make one, Joseph stated, his eyes glinting with commitment. We'll use the control room systems to analyze the crawl DNA, synthesize a compatible genetic signature. Eva's voice, terse and urgent, broke the silence. Joseph, the crawl, they're not just advancing. They're trying to destroy the towers. They know what's happening. As if to punctuate her words, the entire control room shuddered. Alarms blared. The central display flickered erratically, showing the energy levels of the primary terraforming tower spiking wildly. The central tower, Myra cried, her voice filled with alarm. It's destabilizing, if it goes critical. The image on the screen showed the tower glowing with an unnatural intensity, cracked spider webbing across its ancient surface. It could trigger a chain reaction. Destabilize the entire planet. Joseph stared at the cascading lines of code, the Prilorian script blurring before his eyes. Damn it, he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. The resources. They're just not here. Synthesizing a full genetic signature with this cobbled-together system is like trying to build a skyscraper with spare parts from a toaster. He glanced at Myra, her face etched with concentration, fingers flying across the archaic console. Anything. The degradation is accelerating, she replied, her voice tight. I can isolate segments, but a full signature. It's beyond our capabilities here. A jolt ran through the control room, throwing them against the consoles. Alarms blared. Eva's voice crackled over the comms. Raise, we've got a problem. Crawl aggression is spiking. And they're different, bigger, faster. The standard rounds aren't cutting it anymore. Outside, the ground trembled. The central terraforming tower, a colossal structure of shimmering metal and pulsing energy, groaned under the strain. Localized earthquakes rippled across the landscape, and bursts of raw energy arced into the atmosphere, painting the sky with eerie green and purple hues. Joseph ran a diagnostic. The tower's energy fluctuations are off the charts. It's destabilizing the entire system. He turned back to Myra, his face grim. And it's affecting the crawl. Their DNA is undergoing accelerated evolution. They're adapting, becoming more resistant, which makes a stable genetic signature impossible, Myra finished, her voice imbued with despair. Each second they change. Outside, Eva was already adapting. Using the rapidly growing and mutated flora vines thick as pythons, razor-edged leaves that sliced through metal, she and her team created a series of improvised traps. Crawl soldiers, their bodies grotesquely swollen and their chitinous armor riddled with pulsating growths, stumbled into the snares, their screams abruptly cut short as the mutated plants constricted and impaled them. The traps slowed their advance, buying precious time. Back in the control room, Myra's fingers danced across the console. "Joseph, I've found something," she said, her voice hushed with excitement. "A hidden file within the terraforming tower network, a failsafe trigger used by the original Prylorian colonists." She decrypted the file, her eyes widening. "It's a sonic frequency." "A sonic frequency," Joseph repeated, skepticism lacing his tone. "How's that supposed to help us?" "I don't know yet," Myra admitted. But it was their last resort. Joseph attempted to replicate the frequency, feeding the data into their makeshift synthesizer. The machine whirred and sputtered, emitting a series of discordant tones. "It's no good," he said, shaking his head. "The technology is too far removed from the original. We're generating the wrong wavelength." Over the comms, Eva's voice was strained. "We just lost Johnson and Perez, took out one of the minor towers, but the crawl, they just keep coming. We're running out of time, Rays." Suddenly, the central terraforming tower emitted a massive energy pulse, bathing the landscape in blinding light. The control room went dark. Alarms shrieked. The toxin distribution system, powered by the tower, sputtered and died. Electrical outages cascaded across the colony. "What the hell was that?" Joseph yelled, scrambling to his feet. "The tower. It overloaded," Myra said, her voice trembling. "It's destabilizing even further." But then Joseph saw something on his monitor, a flicker of hope amidst the chaos. "Wait," he said, his voice rising with excitement. "The energy pulse." It temporarily stabilized the crawl DNA. The accelerated evolution. It slowed down, at least for a few minutes. "It's a window of opportunity." Eva's voice, tight with urgency, filled the comms. "Rays, we've got a squad of crawl heading straight for the central tower. Looks like they're trying to overload the core and bring the whole damn thing down." Myra's fingers flew across the console. "I found more files, the sonic frequency. It's linked to the colonists' distress signal, a means of communicating in an emergency." She paused, thinking quickly. Joseph grabbed a discarded Prylorian communication device, its surface cracked and scarred. "I can modify this," he said, his eyes gleaming with persistence. "Use its modulator to generate the correct wavelength, the sonic frequency." "There's something else," Eva said, her voice tight with urgency. "I found a cache of advanced Prylorian weaponry within the tower, sonic weaponry, enough to level a city block." "Eva, get out of there," Joseph yelled. "That tower's about to blow." The comms went silent. Joseph glanced at the timer on his console. The central terraforming tower was about to reach critical mass. Eva and her team were still inside. "The genetic synthesis. It's failing," Joseph said, his voice filled with frustration. "Even with the stabilized DNA, we don't have enough time." He looked at Myra, his eyes filled with a sudden grit. "We need to focus on the sonic frequency." Myra worked to calibrate the device to the correct settings. "The sonic frequency has a limited range," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "It needs to be broadcast from a nearby location." The comms crackled back to life. "Rays," Eva said, her voice grim. "We're out of time. The tower's going critical. We're evacuating." A pause. "But those crawl bastards are still inside, trying to detonate it manually." Another pause, longer this time, then a sigh. "Against my better judgment, I'm going back in. I'm going to use that Prylorian weaponry to stop them." "Eva, no," Joseph yelled, his voice filled with desperation. But it was too late. The comms went silent again. Then the world exploded. A blinding flash of light engulfed the landscape, followed by a deafening roar that ripped through the air. The central terraforming tower, the linchpin of the entire system, disintegrated in a cataclysmic explosion. The shockwave threw Joseph and Myra against the walls of the control room. The lights flickered and died. The console sparked and smoked. The air filled with the acrid smell of burning metal. When the dust settled, the central terraforming tower was gone, reduced to a smoldering crater. The network was severed. The weaponized toxin system was deactivated. Toxin distribution offline, Rays, Eva's voice crackled over the comms. Confirmed complete shutdown, but we've got a bigger problem, the flora. It's changing, fast. Spreading like a damn plague. In the makeshift lab, Joseph wrestled with the Prilorian communication device, its smooth alien curves resisting his clumsy human fingers. Sparks flew as he rerouted power conduits, his brow furrowed in concentration. Almost got it. He muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. The comm device was never designed to be a sonic weapon. He was forcing it, bending it to his will with scavenged parts and sheer desperation. Across the room, Myra stared intently at a holographic display, her fingers dancing across the controls. The terraforming network. It's in critical failure, she announced, her voice tight with concern. The tower's destruction has destabilized everything. The system was designed to suppress volatile mutations to keep the ecosystem in check. Now, a roar shattered the tense silence. Eva's voice, strained and urgent, cut through the air. Contact, mutated fauna there. Aggressive, way more than before. Rostova to Rays, we need backup. These things are juiced. Joseph grabbed his rifle, adrenaline surging through him. Myra, stay here. Finish your analysis. Outside, the jungle had transformed into a nightmare. Towering, bioluminescent fungi pulsed with an eerie light, casting grotesque shadows. The air thrummed with the screeching of mutated creatures, razor-clawed reptiles with iridescent scales, and insectoids with chitinous armor that deflected laser fire. Eva and her team fought with grim efficiency, their weapons spitting bolts of energy, but the creatures kept coming, driven by a primal fury. Joseph joined the fray, his rifle barking, each shot precise and deadly. He moved with a practiced grace, weaving through the chaos, a whirlwind of controlled violence. Back in the lab, Myra's fingers flew across the controls, her eyes scanning the data streams. The terraforming tower restricted genetic diversity, kept species isolated, she called out. Now with it gone, they're cross-breeding, evolving at an accelerated rate. It's unpredictable. Joseph, panting, relayed over comms, unpredictable how? Give me something I can use, Myra. He returned to the lab after beating back the first wave. We don't have time for this. He glared at the comm device. We need that emitter operational now. Eva's voice interrupted. Rays, cache perimeter established. We're using the mutated vines as natural barriers. Those things are nasty, even the crawl are giving them a wide berth. Myra suddenly gasped. I've found something. A specific sonic frequency. It resonates with the mutated crawl DNA. It could amplify the emitter's effectiveness tenfold. Hope flickered in Joseph's eyes. Can you isolate it? Minutes later, Joseph carefully integrated the new frequency into the comm device. The device hummed, then sputtered. Damn it, power drain is too high. Range is reduced by half. He smacked his fist on the table. A sigh of frustration escaped his lips. Eva's voice, filled with grim amusement, broke through the tension. Looks like we aren't the only ones having fun with the local wildlife. The mutated fauna is tearing into the crawl lines. It's a three-way free-for-all out here. That's useful, Joseph admitted, a grim smile playing on his lips. Rays, Myra said, her voice low. The weapon cache. The entrance is underground, narrow tunnels. Only humans can navigate them easily. Joseph nodded. I was hoping you'd say that. He paused. Myra, the emitter needs to be tested, but away from the flora. I don't want to weaponize the sonic frequency against our defenses. Eva's voice again, sending a team down now to the nearest crawl outpost, setting up remote activation. Give us 10 mics. Joseph and Myra huddled over the comms, watching the data stream from Eva's team as they navigated the claustrophobic tunnels. The tension was palpable, a heavy weight in the air. "They're in position," Eva's voice crackled. "Emitter is set. Crawl outpost is packed with bodies. Ready when you are, Rays." Joseph took a deep breath, his hand hovering over the activation switch. "Here we go, may as well see if we can make a big splash." He flipped the switch. The jungle air crackled with energy. A high-pitched whine, inaudible to the human ear, pulsed from the modified communication device. Silence. Then Eva's voice, tight with confusion. "Nothing. I don't see anything. Did it work?" Before Joseph could respond, Eva's voice cut through again, imbued with urgency and fear. "Rays, we've got a problem, a big one. I'm seeing a massive heat signature, a huge force of mutated fauna heading straight for our perimeter. They're drawn to the energy discharge. Brace yourselves, people. This is gonna get ugly." "How many?" Joseph asked, his voice tight. Eva spat, the sound barely audible over the screeching cacophony outside. "Too damn many. Hundreds, maybe thousands. And they're not the only ones having a bad day. The sonic emitter definitely softened up the crawl, but..." Joseph cut her off, his gaze fixed on the readings from his wrist-mounted scanner. "I'm seeing a massive surge of biosignatures converging near the crawl outpost. It's like they're being drawn to it. Drawn to it and tearing it apart," Eva confirmed grimly. "The crawl are weakened, all right, but these things, they're even more aggressive than before. We traded one problem for a whole lot more." Myra, her face illuminated by the flickering holographic display of her makeshift lab, spoke, her voice tinged with a chilling understanding. "The sonic frequency. It didn't just disrupt the crawl, it accelerated the mutation rate. By several orders of magnitude. It's rewriting their DNA on the fly." A fresh wave of roars echoed through the jungle, closer now, filled with the unmistakable sounds of crawl screams and heavy weaponry firing in desperation, then abruptly ceasing. Joseph pictured the scene: the crawl outpost, once a symbol of their dominance, now a charnel house overrun by monstrous creatures of their own making. Eva cursed under her breath. "The flora is reacting too. I'm seeing accelerated growth, new thorns, barbs. Even the damn leaves are sharper. It's mutating as well." Joseph ran a hand through his close-cropped hair, his face etched with frustration. The emitter. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a catalyst. It amplified the ecosystem's instability, turned everything into a weapon. "We can't hold this perimeter," Eva stated flatly. "Not against that. Rays, we fall back. Now, weapon cache is our only chance." Joseph nodded, his decision made. "Rostova, you're right, Myra with us." As they sprinted through the increasingly hostile jungle, Joseph keyed his comm. "Command, this is Rays. We're pulling back to the designated fallback point. Request immediate evac." "Static." He tried again, still nothing. Eva, firing short, controlled bursts from her pulse rifle to clear a path, cursed again. "Comms are still down, and I'm picking up crawl reinforcements inbound. They got a distress signal out before the fun started." They reached the entrance to the weapon cache, a narrow opening concealed beneath a tangle of mutated vines. Myra, panting, pointed to a series of deactivated holographic projectors built into the rock face. The Prilorians. They had a terraforming network here. To make the planet more amenable, and Joseph prompted, his voice tight with impatience. "We could use it," Myra said, her voice hesitant. "Create a localized atmospheric anomaly, neutralize the mutated fauna, at least in the immediate area." Joseph's teeth clenched. "Absolutely not. That network is unstable, unpredictable. We don't know what it'll do." Eva leveled a glare at Joseph. "We're out of options, Rays. Either we try something crazy or we die, and those crawl ain't gonna be happy to see us." Joseph stared at the approaching wave of mutated fauna, their silhouettes visible through the dense foliage, then back at Myra, her face pale but determined. He knew the risks. He also knew they were running out of time. All right, he conceded, but we're not just neutralizing them, we're weaponizing this. Myra, can you target the tunnels of the weapon cache, create the anomaly inside? Myra nodded, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of fear and excitement. I can try, but it will take power. I'll have to reroute it from the weapon cache's energy reserves. How much power? Joseph asked. Enough to reduce our weapon charge capacity by at least 30%, Myra replied grimly. Do it, Joseph said, his voice firm. Rostova, prep for a last stand. Use the mutated flora as cover, anything to buy us some time. Myra scrambled to the control panel, her fingers flying across the alien interface. Sparks flew as she bypassed safety protocols, rerouting power with reckless abandon. Inside the tunnels, the hum of the terraforming network grew louder, a deep, resonant thrum that vibrated through the rock. Eva, meanwhile, was busy transforming the area around the weapon cache entrance into a death trap. She used her combat knife to hack off mutated vines, weaving them into a makeshift barricade, their razor-sharp thorns facing outwards. She then planted several of the more aggressively flowering plants around the perimeter, their brightly colored blooms concealing a deadly neurotoxin. The first wave of mutated fauna hit the perimeter with brutal force. Giant, insectal creatures with razor-sharp claws and acid-spitting mandibles tore into the barricade, their roars deafening. Eva, firing with deadly accuracy, dropped them one by one, her pulse rifle spitting bolts of superheated plasma. Suddenly, the ground beneath them vibrated. The air crackled with energy, and from deep within the weapon cache, a strange, ethereal glow emanated. Myra shouted, "It's active! The anomaly is contained within the tunnels." The roars of the mutated fauna inside the tunnels abruptly ceased. A moment later, they emerged, blinking in confusion, their aggressive postures gone, their mutated features slowly reverting to their original docile forms. Joseph stared at the creatures, his mind racing. An idea sparked, a crazy, desperate idea. "Rostova," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "we're not just defending. We're integrating." Eva raised an eyebrow, her expression a mixture of disbelief and grudging admiration. "Integrating what exactly?" "These overgrown space bunnies." "Exactly," Joseph replied, a grim smile spreading across his face. "Use them as living shields. They're not aggressive anymore. The other mutated fauna won't attack them. We'll use them to break their charge." Eva, after a moment of stunned silence, nodded slowly. "All right, Rays, you crazy son of a bitch. Let's see if these things can take a beating." She grabbed one of the docile, rabbit-like creatures by its long ears and dragged it towards the barricade. The creature, seemingly unfazed, simply blinked its large, innocent eyes. With a shrug, Eva shoved the creature into position, its furry body providing a surprisingly effective barrier against the razor-sharp thorns of the mutated vines. "All right, you overgrown furball," she muttered. "Time to earn your keep." She turned to the next docile creature, ready to integrate it into the ever-evolving defensive perimeter. Eva's voice, tight with urgency, crackled over the comms. "Large crawl force inbound, grid Delta 7. Looks like our little distress call was heard loud and clear. Estimate, at least 100 soldiers plus armor." Joseph's gaze swept the jungle canopy, calculating. "Right, fauna shield, time to move." He pointed towards a cluster of lumbering, six-legged grazers, their hides thick with moss and lichen. "We use them. Mobile cover. They're docile enough we can guide them." Myra, her brow furrowed, spoke up. "The terraforming network. We could initiate a localized smokescreen along our advance. Obscure their vision, even the odds." Joseph hesitated, his eyes flicking between the approaching crawl position and the control interface on his wrist. "That network's already bleeding power. Strain it too much and we're blind and deaf." But he glanced at Myra, a flicker of reluctant trust in his eyes. "Precision is key, Myra. Minimal output. Can you do it?" "I can," she stated, her voice firm. "But weapons reserves will drop further. It's a gamble. Every breath out here is a gamble." Joseph retorted, then keyed his comm. Eva, power redistribution to the terraforming network. Prepare for advance. Myra's fingers danced across her wrist console, rerouting power with practiced efficiency. The energy drain was palpable, the hum of their makeshift base camp noticeably weakening. Smokescreen parameters set, commencing sequence. The lumbering grazers, nudged and guided by the three, began their slow, inexorable advance. Their bulk absorbed the initial volley of crawl fire, the energy bolts dissipating harmlessly against their thick hides. The air filled with the acrid smell of burnt moss and the lowing of the startled beasts. Eva, her rifle already at her shoulder, scanned the advancing crawl formation. Command vehicle spotted. Center mass heavily armored. Prioritize that vehicle, Eva, Joseph barked. Take it down, disrupt their command structure. A heartbeat of silence, then the sharp crack of Eva's rifle echoed through the jungle. A plume of smoke erupted from the command vehicle, followed by a series of panicked shouts in crawl. Command vehicle neutralized, Eva confirmed, her voice devoid of emotion. Chaos is blooming. The crawl advance faltered, their formations breaking down in the face of the unexpected resistance and the sudden loss of leadership. Some began to fall back, but others deployed small, disc-shaped devices that emitted a shimmering field. The docile fauna recoiled, their placid eyes widening in distress as they stumbled back from the invisible barrier. Joseph cursed under his breath. Shields, specifically designed to repel. Biological agents, damn it, they anticipated the fauna. Suddenly, Myra gasped, her eyes wide with alarm. Energy spike. Within the terraforming network itself, it's fluctuating wildly. A low rumble vibrated through the ground, growing in intensity. The air crackled with static electricity. Above them, the sky churned with unnatural speed, dark clouds swirling into existence where moments before there had been clear sky. Rain began to fall, heavy and torrential, mixed with stinging sleet. Shut it down, Myra. Joseph yelled over the rising wind. Cut the power now. Myra's fingers flew across the console, her face contorted in frustration. I'm trying, but the controls, they're unresponsive. The network's locked. I can't override it. Eva's voice, strained, cut through the chaos. Weather's intensifying, visibility's zero. We're sitting ducks out here. Joseph's mind raced, piecing together the fragments. They knew. The crawl knew we tried to use the network. They destabilized it, overloaded the system with a feedback pulse from their initial assault. Myra, her face illuminated by the flickering console light, looked up, her expression grim. It's worse than that, Joseph. After further review, I can see that the network's primary processing core is being overridden by a foreign program. It's crawl, Myra said, her voice tight with a mixture of shock and anger. A highly sophisticated encryption. It's designed to exploit a vulnerability in the Prylorian terraforming network's operating system. Joseph frowned. How did the crawl even know about a vulnerability like that? Myra's fingers flew across the console. It had to be someone on the inside. Crawl spies, maybe even. Prylorian collaborators. A burst of static crackled through their comms. Rays, Eva's voice cut through the interference. The weather's getting worse. We're seeing localized electrical storms now. This fauna shield is becoming a liability. Fall back, Sergeant, Joseph ordered. Relocate to a more sheltered position, deeper into the caves. Myra, face illuminated by the flickering console light, spoke. I've isolated the core program. It's recursive, designed to exponentially increase energy draw, eventually overloading the entire system. How long? Joseph asked, his voice calm despite the rising tension. Before overload. Approximately 30 minutes, Myra replied, her fingers a blur across the controls. If it remains unaddressed. Ray's comms are going to hell. Eva's voice was filled with static. These electrical storms are messing with everything. Coordination is getting difficult. Myra cursed under her breath, lines of code scrolling past her eyes. I'm trying to create a firewall contain the program, but the crawl code is adaptive. It's rerouting around my defenses. Joseph considered their options, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Reroute power. Divert energy from the weapon systems to bolster Myra's firewall. Myra's head snapped up. Are you insane? That will leave us defenseless against the crawl. It's a calculated risk, Joseph said, his gaze unwavering. We prioritize saving the terraforming network. Do it. The hum of the base shifted as power was diverted, the weapon systems visibly dimming on Eva's tactical display. Raise, Eva's voice was strained. We've got a surge in crawl troop movements. They know. They know something's wrong with the network and they're pressing their attack. Myra's brow furrowed in concentration. The firewall is partially containing it, slowing its progress, but new instabilities are emerging. Other nodes of the network are showing signs of corruption. Focus on stabilizing the core, Myra, Joseph commanded. Sergeant Rostova will handle the crawl. Understood, Myra responded, her voice tight with purpose. Another crackle of static followed by Eva's grim report. They're deploying heavy artillery, something big, capable of penetrating our sheltered position, and the fauna's shielding. Joseph glanced at the tactical display, his stomach sinking. The crawl were indeed pushing forward, their advance relentless. He could see the energy signatures of the heavy artillery growing brighter with each passing second. Myra status, Joseph barked, his eyes flicking between the tactical display and Myra's focused face. The core. It's unstable, Myra said, her voice barely a whisper. If we continue to attempt a manual override, there's a risk of cascading failure across the entire network. Joseph's blood ran cold. Cascading failure, what does that mean? Myra looked up, her eyes filled with a terrible realization. Planet-wide devastation, volcanic activity, atmospheric collapse, this world. It would become uninhabitable. The comms crackled again. Raise, Eva's voice was urgent, bordering on panic. The crawl artillery, it's about to fire. Joseph's mind raced. He was faced with a choice, stark and brutal. Abandon the network, focus on immediate survival, and let the crawl have this world, or risk everything, their lives, the entire planet, to try and save it. Diagnostic, Myra, now. Joseph barked, his fingers flying across a makeshift console jury rigged from salvaged Prylorian tech. The air crackled with ozone, the scent sharp in his nostrils. Eva, already a blur of motion, was speaking into her comm. Repositioning, drawing their fire. Don't get sentimental if I don't make it back for tea. A burst of crawl artillery slammed into the ridge beside her, showering her position in rock and superheated plasma. Myra's fingers danced across the console, her face illuminated by the flickering holographic display. Multiple cascade pathways. Core energy feedback loop. It's feeding their program, amplifying its reach across the network. Her voice was tight with concentration. Eva's voice, gritty with static, cut through the technical jargon. Got one of the bastards. Artillery emplacement down. But I'm taking some serious heat here. The ground bucked beneath their feet as another barrage landed closer, shaking the entire structure. Joseph's eyes narrowed, a plan forming in his mind. Myra, can we generate a counter-feedback pulse? Overload their program using its own energy against it. Myra's head snapped up, her eyes wide with alarm. Joseph, that's incredibly risky. The energy matrix is already unstable. A counter-pulse could destabilize the entire planet. Earthquakes, tectonic shifts. Joseph's eyes hardened. I know the risks. Create a limited pulse, Myra. Target only the core program. Contain the blast radius as much as possible. He watched Eva's position marker on his display, knowing time was running out. Crawl infantry inbound. Eva's voice was strained. Flanking maneuver. No way I can fall back without getting turned into paste. Myra hesitated for a fraction of a second, then slammed her fist onto the activation rune. Pulse initiated. A low hum resonated through the facility, building to a deafening crescendo. The lights flickered violently and the air thrummed with barely suppressed energy. Then, silence, followed by a deep guttural rumble from beneath their feet. Core program. Dissipated, Myra announced, her voice trembling, but localized seismic activity, right on top of the crawl positions. Bingo, Eva grunted. A moment later her voice crackled with triumphant laughter. Seismic disruption gave me the opening I needed. Launched a surprise counterattack. Crawl infantry routed. They're scattering like roaches, but Joseph wasn't celebrating. He was staring intently at the readings on his console. The seismic activity, it's increasing, spreading. Myra, what's happening? Myra's face was pale, her eyes darting across the lines of code scrolling across her screen. There's residual code. The crawl program, even in its death throes, is still trying to exploit the energy feedback loop. It is also trying to access the files of the colonists. It knows about the weaponization of the local flora. Can you purge it? Joseph asked, his voice tight. Impossible, Myra said, shaking her head. It's too deeply embedded, but maybe, just maybe, there's a way to use it. Transport ship, Eva yelled, her voice sharp with urgency. Crawl transport attempting to land reinforcements just beyond the ridge. Shields are weakened from the seismic activity. Joseph's eyes narrowed, his mind racing. This was it. Their last chance. Eva, disable that transport now. That's our only way to cut off their offensive. Into the comms. Eva's triumphant shout was cut short by a grinding screech of metal on rock, followed by a concussive boom that rattled Joseph's teeth even through the comms unit. The ground lurched violently. Eva, report. Joseph yelled, his voice tight with anxiety. A garbled response crackled through the comms, barely audible above the rising roar. Chain reaction. Seismic. Destabilizing. The world bucked again. Cracks spiderwebbed across the viewport of their makeshift command center. Outside, a distant volcano belched a plume of ash that blotted out the already dim light. The air tasted of sulfur. Seismic activity spiking. Myra shouted, her fingers flying across the console. Magnitude increasing exponentially. We're looking at widespread earthquakes and volcanic eruptions within minutes. Eva, get out of there. Joseph barked into the comms. That's an order, static, then a burst of static-laced defiance. Negative, Captain, still got crawl signatures, can't leave 'em to regroup. Besides, a dry chuckle, someone's gotta keep the bugs off your back. Myra's fingers danced across the console. Joseph, the residual crawl code. It's not just shutting down the network, it's attempting to seize control of the planet's core. It's accelerating the destabilization. Joseph's face hardened. What had started as a rescue operation, then a desperate defense, had become a fight to save an entire planet. Then we stop it. How? Myra's voice was tinged with desperation. The code is buried deep within the planetary control systems. We can't reach it directly. The colony's central terraforming hub, Joseph said, his eyes narrowing. It's the only system powerful enough to interface directly with the planet's core. We use it to inject a counter-program. It's a long shot, Captain, Myra said, but it's our only shot. Joseph tried to raise Eva again. Nothing but static, his gut twisted. Let's move. He grabbed his rifle, Myra shouldering her own weapon. They sprinted out of the command center, the ground trembling beneath their feet. The air grew thick with ash, stinging their eyes and choking their lungs. Buildings crumbled around them, reduced to piles of rubble. The sky was a swirling vortex of smoke and fire. They reached the central terraforming hub, or what was left of it. A section of the massive dome had collapsed, exposing twisted metal and sparking wires. Alarms blared, a cacophony of impending doom. Powers fluctuating wildly, Myra shouted over the din, her face illuminated by the flickering emergency lights. The primary systems are offline. Myra dove into the chaos of wires and sparking conduits, her Prilorian dexterity a blur. Joseph, rifle raised, scanned the perimeter, his senses on high alert. Every tremor felt like a death knell. Every shadow seemed to conceal a lurking crawl. Almost. Myra grunted, sweat beading on her forehead. The crawl code is nearing completion. Planetary core integration at 98%. A final surge of power crackled through the room as Myra slammed a panel shut. The alarms intensified, then abruptly cut out, replaced by a low, rhythmic hum. Primary systems online, Myra gasped, wiping her brow. But the terraforming protocols are corrupted. We can't use them. Joseph stepped up to the main console, his face grim. Then we override them. Captain, are you sure? That could destabilize the entire system. We don't have a choice, Joseph said, his voice firm. It's the only way to inject the counter-program. He began inputting the override sequence, his fingers moving with practiced precision. Override complete, Joseph announced, preparing to inject counter-program. Myra stared at the screen, her eyes wide. Joseph, the counter-program. It's not just a virus, it's a planetary defense system. Joseph nodded grimly. This colony wasn't just about terraforming, it was a failsafe, a last resort. Someone planned for this a long time ago. He took a deep breath, his hand hovering over the activation button. Here we go. He smacked his palm down. The entire terraforming hub shuddered, groaning under the strain. The air crackled with energy, the room bathed in an eerie blue light. The planet-wide seismic activity abruptly ceased. The grinding, groaning, and shaking stopped. The volcano stopped belching, the ground stopped trembling. An unsettling silence descended. Then a crackle of static. Horizon Actual, this is Rostova. Do you read? Eva's voice, tinny but clear, filled the comms. Crawl forces retreating. Tremors stopped in my location. What the hell did you do? Relief washed over Joseph, but it was short-lived. Myra's voice cut through the quiet, her tone tinged with awe and a hint of fear. Joseph, I'm detecting a new energy signature emanating from the planet's core. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. It's alive. Joseph stared at the swirling patterns on the console, a sense of profound unease settling in his stomach. Whatever happens next, he said, his voice low, we did what we could, and we defied their expectations again. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light erupted from the planet's core. A massive pulse of pure energy, unlike anything they had ever witnessed, shot skyward, heading directly towards the incoming crawl fleet in orbit. The sky ripped open, not with a bang, but with a silent, blinding eruption of pure energy. It cascaded outwards, a wave of shimmering light that engulfed the crawl fleet. Ships vaporized instantly, their metal hulls dissolving into nothingness. The laughter that had echoed across the comms just moments before was abruptly, permanently silenced. Space, once filled with the menacing shapes of crawl warships, was now empty, save for the lingering glow of the energy discharge. Myra stared at her console, her fingers flying across the controls as she analyzed the readings. It's a planetary defense system, she announced, her voice filled with awe. Dormant until now. The counter-program you seeded, Joseph, it didn't just disrupt their systems, it activated this. It's symbiotic. It draws energy from the planet's core, and now it's protecting us, protecting it from any future threats. Flashback, a grainy image flickered across Myra's console, colonists in sterile lab suits, working tirelessly amidst strange, glowing flora. A voice filled with quiet willpower spoke. The core energies of this planet, our last resort, should the crawl ever come. A seed of hope buried deep. The image dissolved. Joseph stood, his gaze fixed on the empty sky. They knew, he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. The colonists, they sacrificed themselves, seeding this planet not just for survival but to ensure this defense would awaken when humanity needed it most. A familiar voice crackled over the comms. Well, I'll be damned, Eva drawled, her voice infused with a mixture of relief and awe. Just got back to the colony. Looks like someone threw one hell of a party up there. Not a single crawl left standing, or floating for that matter. Joseph turned to face Eva's image on the screen. We did it, Eva, all of us. You, Myra, and them, the colonists. He paused, a flicker of a smile touching his lips, teamwork and a little bit of legacy. The tremors that had plagued the planet for days began to subside. The oppressive atmosphere cleared, and sunlight streamed through the dense jungle canopy, illuminating the vibrant flora. The planet seemed to sigh in relief, its wounds slowly beginning to heal. Myra's console chimed, displaying an incoming message. Her fingers danced across the interface, and a holographic image of a Prylorian official materialized. "Myra," the official said, his tone carefully neutral, "the Empire understands the circumstances. We offer you amnesty, return home, and all will be forgiven." Myra's mind focused. She glanced at Joseph, then at Eva's image on the screen. Her voice was firm, resolute. "I appreciate the offer," she said, "but I must decline. My home is here now." She turned to Joseph, her eyes shining with conviction. "The Prylorian Empire is stagnant, clinging to outdated traditions, but humanity, you possess a spark, an ingenuity, a compassion that I have never seen before. I believe that you represent the best hope for this galaxy." Joseph smiled, a genuine, heartfelt expression. "Then welcome home, Myra." A few weeks later, a small ceremony was held. The human colony, once a struggling outpost on the edge of known space, was officially renamed New Horizon. The name echoed in the wind, carrying with it the promise of a new beginning, a future forged in the crucible of conflict and understanding. Joseph, Eva, and Myra stood on a hill overlooking the burgeoning settlement, the setting sun casting long shadows behind them. New Horizon was a testament to their combined efforts, a symbol of hope rising from the ashes of war. Joseph surveyed the scene, his gaze sweeping across the rebuilt structures and the thriving vegetation. He turned to Myra and Eva, a quiet pride in his voice. "We may be small," he said, "but our spirit, our adaptability, it makes us a force to be reckoned with." Eva chuckled, leaning against her rifle. "Yeah, well, I'd say we definitely proved those crawl bastards wrong. 3 humans, huh? They should have sent more." Myra smiled, a genuine, radiant expression that reached her eyes. She looked at Joseph, then at Eva, a sense of belonging washing over her. She had found a true home, a purpose among these humans. She had bridged the gap between 2 species, and in doing so had found herself. The camera slowly panned out, rising above New Horizon, showcasing its beauty and resilience. The planetary defense system, now a silent guardian, pulsed with a gentle energy beneath the surface. The image lingered, a promise of peace and prosperity for New Horizon, a beacon of hope in the vast, often unforgiving galaxy. The Crawl were gone, and humanity had not only survived but thrived, proving that even the smallest flame can ignite the darkest night.